Yo friends, welcome to Next Level Consciousness with Linnea Stella. Today we have come to the Fearful Avoidant attachment style, also known as disorganized attachment style. So I will refer to it as Fearful Avoidant for short. And we will be working, or I will explain today, the integrated attachment theory approach, because this is slightly different from standard or conventional attachment theory, in that we also look at a solution. So we will look at some common characteristics, emotional patterns, coping mechanisms, core wounds, needs, boundaries, expectations. I think that was all. Yeah, for the fearful avoidance. And when we get all this data and we get very detailed, the magic is in the details, right? If you have a problem to solve, you first need to know what is the problem that we are solving. And you are of course not a problem if you are a fearful avoidant attachment style. You are an amazing human, but you can heal and become securely attached with the keys that I am giving you today. Okay, so I aim really to give you clues at how you can start to heal and become securely attached. So that's the good news. But what is really a fearful avoidant? So this is the third and last part in my 3-part series about the insecure attachment styles. So we have covered the anxious attachment style, the dismissive avoidant attachment style, and now we have come to the fearful avoidant. And the reason that I chose to save this for the last is that the fearful avoidant is like a mix of the anxious attachment style and the dismissive attachment style, dismissive avoidant attachment style, in that it is hot and cold. It is a very unpredictable attachment style in relationships. So it can sometimes tend to be more anxious and activate. Activating means that when you are triggered, you seek closeness. And it can sometimes act more avoidant and deactivate when triggered. So deactivate is that you take distance. So that is why it's also referred to as disorganized attachment style, because it is unpredictable. You never really know how the fearful avoidant is going to react. So if you are in a relationship with a fearful avoidant, or if you're dating a fearful avoidant, it can be very challenging to know what you can really do to support them and to help them. And I always say that if you recognize that you are dating a person with an insecure attachment style, it's really helpful to watch these videos and to really learn, because this goes so much deeper also than just attachment theory in general. This really explains like what is going on under the hood in the mind of your partner, of your date, so that you can be more compassionate and understand them and also support them in their healing. But that being said, you can never do the work for someone. As the saying goes, you can lead it to the water, but you can't make it drink the horse, I think. But you understand, this is for you if you feel like there is a lot of love in the relationship, a lot of potential, and that your partner is actually trying with you. Then it helps to know this. But if you are the only one who is interested in seeing improvements and doing the work and growing and healing and overcoming the challenges that you have in your relationship, it might be time to reconsider the relationship if you feel like your partner isn't showing any effort over a period of time. So I just want to put it out there that this is not for you to do the work for someone else, because that's not how life works. So how do you know that someone is a fearful avoidant? They are very charismatic, warm, generous, and likable. So you can see that this is in stark contrast if you are thinking like, oh, I think that I am avoidant, or that my partner is avoidant, but I don't know if it's the dismissive or the fearful avoidant. Well, this is a big difference, that the fearful avoidant is much more open and emotionally open, inviting, likable, because that was the strategy that they developed in childhood to try to earn love. And as I said, if you watch the video about the dismissive avoidant, that I'm not going to go into the details in how we develop the attachment styles, but that came from childhood, from the relationship that you have with your parents or your primary caregivers. So you can read more about that if you're interested. But for the fearful avoidant, the relationship was very chaotic. So it was of the nature that sometimes the parent or caregiver was present and gave them love, and sometimes they were not present. And the child who developed the fearful avoidant style never really knew what to expect. So that is why fearful avoidants are hypervigilant. They are experts at reading people, and that's what also makes them very empathetic and likable and warm. but it comes from kind of a traumatic place that they needed this to feel some kind of safety. They needed to be able to quickly read a room and see like, okay, how is my parent feeling today? How can I best like soothe them and avoid any kind of punishment or conflict? And how can I get love and connection despite feeling this disconnect? So that's why fearful avoidants are experts in reading people. And they also often walk on eggshells. They are afraid of taking up too much space, of creating some kind of discomfort or conflict. They are also very generous. They can be very intense in relationships and often come on strong. So they can be very intense in the beginning of a relationship before their wounds are triggered. They show a lot of interest and almost obsession. So the other person can almost be like, whoa, okay, this is a lot. But since the fearful avoidant is also very understanding and they can almost read the other person's mind, they are very in tune with people. They also often feel very appreciated. So it's not this like narcissist thing, but the fearful avoidance is very empathetic. But still it can feel like, wow, okay, this person is really into me so fast and there is no really solid ground to stand on. And then as soon as they appear, they disappear again. And the person, if you're the person dating a fearful avoidant, you're probably a bit shocked or hurt or what happened? Like everything was going so well and I felt this deep, strong connection between us. And then the next second they're gone with no explanation. So acting hot and cold is like the number one way that you can identify a fearful avoidant. And also that they are suspicious. Because as we shall see, trust is one of the biggest challenges for a fearful avoidant. And we saw for the dismissive avoidant, it's more about shame. That they very often and easily feel shame, and that's this big burden they carry. For the fearful avoidant, it's more the lack of trust, even though they also feel shame to a certain extent. So some common emotional patterns for the fearful avoidant is that they can get angry. And we're gonna come to that when we speak about boundaries, because it is related to their boundaries. But anger, feeling hurt, offended, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, and guilty. And also pressured. They easily feel pressured in relationships. So we see that guilt and shame are quite prominent emotional patterns for the fearful avoidant. But I would say that the main difference from the dismissive avoidant is that the fearful avoidant has more like fiery expressions of their emotions. So they can express anger, they can be very intense, dramatic, whilst the dismissive avoidant is more low-key, and when they feel triggered, they're more like walking away, closing the door kind of thing, but not like causing a scene. And I also want to say that fearful avoidant is the attachment style that is most interested in personal growth, personal development. They're really into this kind of videos. So maybe if you're watching this and you are a fearful avoidant, or you recognize a lot of fearful avoidant, but you're like, oh, but I'm not being dramatic, I'm not having these outbursts of anger. Maybe it's just because you have a lot of self-awareness and you're not just expressing that anger and taking it out on anyone who is close, but you still have that seed of anger inside of you when you feel triggered. But maybe you, especially if you are a feminine, a woman, you have learned to suppress that so much so that you're not expressing it. So you can still be a fearful avoidant even if you don't recognize that you are quote-unquote dramatic. That is just my way of describing it, because that is how the energy kind of comes off without you meaning it, of course. And I would say personally that I am securely attached now, but in the past I definitely was a fearful avoidant, more leaning on the anxious side, because that is also characteristic for the fearful avoidant, that depending on the person that they are connecting with at the moment, they can get more into the anxious side or more into the avoidant side. And this often happens as a polarization. So if you're dating someone who is more anxious, you become more avoidant. However, if you're dating someone who is more avoidant, you go more into the anxious side. Because insecure attachment styles, they often relate through trauma bonding rather than these deep soul connections. Some common needs for a fearful avoidant is emotional depth, patience, trust, safety, growth. So you can see that they really want this depth, like they don't want these surface level relationships where there is minimal interaction and no vulnerability. They want it, but on the other hand, they also have the need for independence, for autonomy, like the dismissive avoidant. So there we see that they have these more needs that we also see in the anxiously attached person of connection and depth, but they also have the needs we see in the dismissive avoidant person. But what is typical for the fearful avoidant is this need for growth and novelty. They also want their freedom, yet intimacy, and they want to feel wanted by their partner. So as I said for the dismissive... Was that a ghost? So as I said about the dismissive avoidant, it can be quite challenging for the partner or fearful avoidant to know, how am I actually going to meet this person's need? Because they want all this freedom and autonomy, but they also want to feel wanted, they want the depth, they want the intimacy. And in an ideal situation, the fearful avoidant actively work on becoming securely attached, which is also the case for all the other insecure attachment styles. So the solution, the best solution, is really to step by step going towards secure attachments, because that's how you will be able to relate from a very stable place. So over to the coping mechanisms for the fearful avoidant. And coping mechanisms are those often automatic autopilot behaviors that we fall into when we are triggered. And I already mentioned one of them in the beginning, which is to take distance, to withdraw when you feel triggered. However, fearful avoidants can also do things like testing their partner, because they have this deep trust wound, that they always are suspicious, they believe that they can't trust their partner. They can also tend to be quite spiteful and criticize their partner and judge when they are triggered. They can show emotional volatility, as I said, with this dramatic behavior. They can also go into one of the 4 F trauma responses, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn means people please. And they can also, to a slightly lesser extent, I would say, than the dismissive avoidant, but still go to creature comforts, which is turn to things like electronics or food. So video games, binge watching Netflix, emotional eating. And also to addictions and substance use. So what are the core wounds of the fearful avoidance? So each of the attachment styles, according to integrated attachment theory, has a set of core wounds that you often can recognize if you have this attachment style. And there are 3 that are the most prominent for each attachment style. So for the fearful avoidant, the top 3 are: I am or will be betrayed. And that means I can't trust. It is not safe to trust. I am unsafe, and I am unworthy. And these are, of course, very heavy wounds to carry. So if you recognize this in yourself, I would suggest that you do some kind of subconscious reprogramming, because that is the good news, that you can, in 21 days, you can completely turn these wounds around, or at least start to see a big difference, because you're literally rewriting your brain, the part of your brain that has kept replaying these wounds over and over when you do that. Some other common core wounds are: I am bad, I am trapped, I am helpless or powerless, I will be abandoned, so the same as for the anxiously attached, I am unloved, I am not good enough, I am disrespected, and I am weak. So what I suggest that you do if you are a fearful avoidant is that you look at all these core wounds and you feel into them, like, okay, which one has the biggest emotional charge? Which one stings a little extra or hurts the most? More likely than not, it's one of the top 3 ones. And then you start to reprogram that and you take it from there. So what's the fearful avoidance relationship to boundaries like? Well, most of the time they don't really have boundaries. So they just give a lot, they're very generous, as we saw in the beginning, they are overgiving. But then what happens when they feel like they're giving and giving and giving and they don't get as much in return is that resentment builds up. So the fearful avoidance starts to resent the person that they are giving to, and at a certain point they often get angry and they explode. So when they get angry, they can set very firm boundaries. And then they drop back into the guilt and they remove all their boundaries again, and it goes into this vicious cycle of overgiving, feeling resentment, getting angry, setting a big boundary, and then remove the boundary out of guilt. So often, or sometimes, fearful avoidance can feel like, oh, but I'm good at setting boundaries. But it's often not coming from this healthy, balanced place, but more from a very triggered and charged place. So that is also an invitation for the fearful avoidant to really see, how can I start to become more aware of my boundaries and start to feel worthy of setting boundaries, because that is often why fearful avoidants have weak boundaries, because they don't feel worthy of having boundaries. And also they fear abandonment if they set boundaries, so we see a similar tendency as the anxiously attached person. So some common expectations in relationships for the fearful avoidant is that my partner should never ever break my trust. And I mean, that sounds beautiful, but they often take it to an extreme. So it's like if the partner says, oh, I'm coming home in 15 minutes, and then they come home in 20 minutes instead, then the fearful avoidant can be like, oh, you lied to me, I can't trust you anymore. Since they have this core wound of, I will be betrayed, I cannot be trusted, their brain automatically looks for proof of that. So they're constantly seeking like, okay, what are the signs that I am about to get betrayed in this situation? Because they also hate to feel this feeling of feeling foolish and like, oh, I should have understood that, and I feel so stupid now because I should have understood that they are going behind my back. So they're very suspicious of them. And that is also the power and beauty of healing and reprogramming your core wound as a fearful avoidant, and with all the insecure attachment styles also, because you will start to look for the things that you do want to see. You will start to look for proof that you can trust, for proof that your partner is there for you, and it's just gonna be a much more balanced and healthy relationship, because often you create and you manifest what you believe to be true. They also expect their partner to be as generous and as giving as they are, and if not, they easily feel taken advantage of. They expect to always feel wanted by their partner and desired, yet they also expect their partner to understand their need for freedom with very little communication. And just like I said for the dismissive avoidant, this is making it very complicated for the partner, because one moment the fearful avoidant wants this closeness and validation and connection and really this emotional depth, and the next moment they really need their independence and their freedom. So that's just my invitation also to you, if you are a fearful avoidant. Try to start to communicate when you need the freedom, and try to set small boundaries in the beginning if it feels very scary to set the bigger boundaries, and ask for space because you so deserve it. So that was all about the fearful avoidant. If you got any value from this video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more videos. We have some very exciting videos coming out the coming days. I can't wait. And thank you so much for watching. You are amazing. See you in the next one.